Welcome to today's Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to share this story with you because it is, quite literally, out of this world. Today, we're diving into the ultimate underdog hero of space exploration. We're talking about a story packed with incredible engineering, a sudden terrifying disaster, and a tiny machine that swooped in to save a multi-billion-dollar mission. Okay, let's jump right in.
I want you to picture the scene in January 2024. Just imagine a desolate, gray, powdery landscape. Absolute, complete silence. You're looking at a location 240,000 miles away from Earth, and out there, sitting completely motionless on the surface of the moon, is an object. It is utterly, entirely alone.
Now, think about the sheer scale of that for a second. In the vast, infinite expanse of the cosmos, where we usually think of massive, towering rockets and giant, car-sized rovers, this stranded object is tiny. I mean, we're talking just 8 centimeters in diameter. To put that into perspective, that's roughly the size of your standard tennis ball. And if you were looking at this little sealed metal sphere just resting there in the lunar dust, you'd probably be incredibly confused. There are no wheels visible, no legs, no treads. And perhaps most terrifyingly for a high-stakes space mission, there is absolutely no remote control or joystick back on Earth piloting it. It is just a silent, sealed ball sitting out there in the void. So you've got to wonder, how could it possibly survive, let alone move? Well, completely on its own, it does something entirely extraordinary. It transforms. Let's walk through this incredible sequence. Step 1, the sphere literally cracks open right down the middle, splitting into 2 halves. Step 2, those 2 halves pull apart and actually become 2 extended wheels. And finally, step 3, a small tail stabilizer drops down for balance, and these tiny cameras unfold right from its center. Without a single human touching a control pad, this little sphere morphs into a fully functional lunar rover. So let's look at SORA-Q, the LEV-2, and its truly unlikely origin. Its official designation is actually LEV-2, standing for Lunar Excursion Vehicle 2, but everybody affectionately calls it SORA-Q. And the story of how SORA-Q came to be is honestly almost as unbelievable as that transformation we just talked about. This brilliant little machine wasn't built just by your typical aerospace team. On one side, sure, you have the elite aerospace engineers from Japan's space agency, JAXA. But on the other side, children's toy designers. Yeah, you heard that right. JAXA partnered with a major toy company, the exact same people who design transforming toys for kids, to help build a robot capable of surviving the harsh realities of the moon.
Now, why on earth would they bring in toy designers? Well, because the engineering constraints they faced were absolutely brutal. The team had to build a robot small enough to fit squarely in the palm of your hand. It had to be light enough to launch cheaply, but tough enough to survive a violent journey to the lunar surface. And because it's so incredibly small, there was practically no room for batteries, no room for heavy processors, and literally zero margin for error. It had to possess completely autonomous intelligence, all packed into an 8-centimeter shell.
Let's take a look at how this unprecedented mission actually unfolded. SORA-Q was packed aboard Japan's SLIM lander, that's the smart lander for investigating moon, and launched into space in September 2023. Fast forward a bit to January 19, 2024, and SORA-Q faced the defining moment of its existence, a short, 2-hour mission right there on the lunar surface. The data gathered from those 2 hours was so profound that on June 10, 2026, the complete findings were officially published in the highly prestigious journal Science Robotics. Which brings us to the terrifying autonomous landing. To understand why those scientific findings were such a massive deal, we really have to look at the sheer terror of the landing itself. Set the scene here. As the huge SLIM lander fired its engines and descended toward that alien surface, it reached a critical altitude, just 1.8 meters above the ground. That is less than 6 feet. And at that exact height, SORA-Q was ejected into the void. It fell that final 1.8 meters as a sealed, compact, protected sphere, basically slamming into the lunar dust. The exact second it touched down, the clock started. SORA-Q had to act fast. But here's the kicker. Mission Control couldn't help it at all. Why? Because a radio signal from Earth to the moon takes over a second each way. If engineers saw SORA-Q in trouble and sent a command to fix it, well over 2 seconds would pass. In a super dynamic landing environment like that, by the time a command actually arrived, the moment to act would already be long gone. So complete autonomy wasn't just some cool feature they added, it was an absolute necessity for its survival. Once it transformed, SORA-Q began to move across terrain that no machine like it had ever touched before.
And the way it moved was totally fascinating. It didn't just drive, it rolled. It kind of waddled over the uneven ground. It bounced its way through the fine, powdery lunar regolith. Honestly, this terrain is so unpredictable that just a single stuck wheel would have meant instant mission failure. Yet, this plucky little robotic explorer waddled and bounced its way to safety.
And it did this for nearly 2 hours. That's how long this palm-sized machine successfully explored the moon, entirely by itself. It navigated the dust, it avoided craters, and it operated exactly as those aerospace engineers and toy designers had hoped.
But then we get to the SLM lander anomaly.
See, while Sora-Q was successfully waddling around having a great time, a massive crisis was unfolding right next to it. Japan had just made history by becoming the 5th nation ever to softly land on the moon with the SLIM lander. But the celebration back at Mission Control abruptly stopped. They were suddenly facing a severe 3-part crisis. First, the telemetry data showed SLIM's final orientation was completely off. Second, because of this, its solar panels were pointed the wrong way and were not generating the expected power. The lander was literally dying. Third, and honestly worst of all, Mission Control was entirely blind. They were looking at incomplete data and had absolutely no visual confirmation of what had actually gone wrong during touchdown.
This multi-billion-dollar mission was effectively flying blind on the surface of the moon. And that is exactly when Sora-Q's role suddenly shifted. It was no longer just some experimental scout. It became something nobody had planned for. A detective.
Sora-Q turned its tiny unfolding cameras back toward the massive SLIM lander. It analyzed the scene, framed the shot, and beamed a photograph all the way back to Earth. When that image popped up on the screens at Mission Control, it completely stunned the engineers. SLIM had landed nose down. It had literally tipped over and was resting on its head. Without Sora-Q, the team might never have known exactly why the lander was failing to generate power. This tiny toy-inspired robot had just solved a major mystery that a huge space agency couldn't see for itself.
Fast forward to June 2026 and the global validation. Which brings us right back to the resolution of our timeline. Over 2 years later, the scientific community officially recognized the sheer magnitude of what Sora-Q had accomplished. Getting on the cover of Science Robotics is no small feat. It is a massive global validation of a totally revolutionary concept. So the crucial takeaways here is that the research paper confirms Sora-Q achieved a historic first, fully autonomous lunar exploration without ground-based teleoperation. Sora-Q activated, it deployed, it stabilized, and it traversed the moon. All without a single human ever pulling a lever or pushing a button.
But why does this matter for you and me, or for the entire future of space travel? Well, because Sora-Q was an unbelievable proof of concept. It proved that ultra-compact autonomous robots can actually survive impossible environments. Engineers are now taking this data to design entire swarms of tiny scouts. Just imagine fleets of these little tennis ball-sized robots exploring cramped lunar lava tubes and narrow caves where giant car-sized rovers simply cannot fit. They're going to act as the vanguard, preceding human astronauts into unknown dangers to map out the terrain long before we ever set foot there.
Sora-Q proved that sometimes the absolute smallest things can accomplish what the biggest things cannot. A tiny 8-centimeter underdog succeeded where a giant multi-billion-dollar machine stumbled, and in doing so, it opened up a whole new frontier for exploration. Which leaves us with a pretty thrilling question to ponder. If a robotic tennis ball can solve a massive mystery on the moon, what else will tiny, autonomous robots uncover in the darkest, most unreachable corners of space? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this sparked your curiosity as much as it did mine. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.